So good morning, church. Good to be together this morning. We are in the Gospel of John, the first chapter. Going to look at the first 14 verses. It's on page 1062 if you're using a Bible that's out amongst you. If you are using an electronic device or you're with us virtually, I encourage you to use the NIV, New International Version, simply because that's what we have, and it's nice to have the same wording for us. Now, before we get to that, a little bit of review. 4 Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We call the first 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we call them the Synoptic Gospels, where we get the word synopsis. It's an overview of the life, the ministry, the death, the resurrection of Jesus. So it's just it's a telling of what happened. The 4th gospel, the Gospel of John, is very, very different, and we see it from the very beginning. You're going to see it in the verses as soon as we start to read it. It's looking at things in a much more deeply spiritual, or perhaps an elevated spiritual level. So the first 3 Gospels are telling you what's happening. The 4th Gospel, John, is telling you what's really happening, what's going on in the spiritual realm, what's happening in the midst of the Spirit of God. Okay? So that's helpful for us as we look at this. Now you're going to see in a moment that it begins with the retelling of Genesis chapter 1. And actually the Gospel of John follows a pattern of Genesis in a really interesting way. If you start to read it, you'll recognize that things seem to happen in a series of weeks. Like this happened, and then in a week, and then a week, and then a week. It's this sense of creation, the 6 days of creation, the 7th day of rest, those 7 days, that are built into the fabric of the Gospel of John. So having said that, let's look at the first 14 verses of the Gospel of John. Listen for the word of the Lord. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing has been made that was made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own didn't receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. It's the word of the Lord. So how many of you have read a book that you're not sure why, but it's kind of stuck with you? There was something in it, maybe almost kind of an aside or whatever that just made you not think the book was absolutely, the greatest book you ever read, but something that has stuck with you, right? So I have that happen a lot to me. And one of those books is a really interesting one. It's written by Franz Kafka. Now, if you, in school, you perhaps were required to read Metamorphosis. You remember that, where the guy turns into a cockroach, he turns into a cockroach actually while he's in his room, and his parents want to get out of his room. So the lesson in that is leave your room, right? Okay, so, but that's the text that we all had to read, most of us had to read about Kafka. But he has a number of writings, but this one is called The Castle. And years ago, when Barnes & Noble was just getting started, I went to Barnes & Noble, I saw it, I picked it up, and I got it. And there are 2 things out of that book. It's not the greatest book I've ever read. In fact, I wouldn't say it's even close to the top, but there are 2 things in it that I think about over and over and over, sometimes even weekly. And the first is this. So what Kafka does is he's writing about a little more than 100 years ago, so early 20th century, and he's presenting this image of a village or a town that is here And then right outside the town is this sort of mountain, and there's a castle on the top of the mountain. And everything that happens that has power, like the government, the bureaucracy, all the kinds of things, the workings of all of that, happen in the castle. And so all the people that are down here kind of living their daily lives, but all the power stuff, the power structure, and all of that's happening up in the castle. And you don't get to go to the castle unless you're called. And if you're called to go to the castle, you're usually in trouble. Something that you've got to be accountable for. So, here's the thing. Every time you're called to the castle, you're only called in the middle of the night. So you go in the dark up to the castle. Many of those people aren't seen again. We're not quite sure really what goes on, or they don't talk about what went on when they come back. And that image has stuck with me ever since I read it, all those decades ago, actually. Is there something about this power of darkness, this power of the night, and how things that occur, the bureaucracy, the totalitarian, whatever it may be, all of that kind of stuff always happens sort of in this sense of darkness and not being transparent, not being able to really see what it is. It's the power of darkness. Now, that's not a modern tactic. Actually goes for us to the very beginning of our scriptures when we look at Genesis chapter 1. And you remember what happens in Genesis chapter 1. I alluded to it a little bit earlier. This is how it begins. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the face of the deep. Now keep in mind, it's formless and empty, but darkness is over it. Right? So here's the first thing we can learn from this, is that in our Bible and our understanding, darkness is emptiness. It exists when there's no light. It exists when things are kept secret, kept hidden. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. Chaos is another word for this. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. A simple beginning, but absolutely critical to our understanding of life. This idea that darkness is a chaos, meaningless, nothing, no form, no nothing is there for us. And God speaks. This is why John says, in the beginning was the Word. God speaks into that darkness and says, "Let there be light," and there's light. And so this God creates this light, and then creation comes out of it. Now, the story of light continues throughout the Old Testament. So the next part, where it really kind of shows itself in a really interesting way, is during the period of the Exodus. So you remember we end up in Egypt, we become enslaved in Egypt for several generations, and then we're set free. Our spiritual ancestors are. And God says, He separates the Red Sea for us. We got to cross to the other side. The Red Sea closes, kills all our enemies that are pursuing us, and we wander in that wilderness for 40 years. And while we wander in the wilderness, there's an interesting thing about the presence of God. God comes with us. And He comes with us in a very interesting way. God comes with us in a tent. We call it a tabernacle, but it literally means tent. He comes with us in a tent, and He tells us how to make the tent, and we make the tent, and we put the tent right outside the camp. And there God is. We believe God is living in that tent. Now, nobody can go but Moses, generally, but God is there, and God is sort of traveling with us. And when Moses goes, and God will say something to him, teach him something, tell him to tell us something, and he comes back and lets us know. And there's some images that come with that. So when God is in the tent, in the tabernacle, if it's daytime, there's always a cloud. And the cloud is over the tent and over the people so that they can travel in the day and not get exhausted by the heat. And at night, there's a light, a fire. So that if anything happens at night, we'll be able to see, we'll be able to move if we need to move at night, if God wants us to move. So you start to find this sense that God creates the heavens and the earth. He says, "Let there be light," and there's light. And so there's this big sense of God's light and creation and all of that. Now, you have an understanding of light, of God journeying with us, God being with us in the tent right outside the camp. Are we together? But it's not enough. It's not enough to assure victory. So we start to realize in the Old Testament that there's this promise, there's this light, there's something that's there, but there's still not, there's no assurance of victory. We don't see how it's gonna turn out right for us in the long run. What if God isn't in the tent? So we move to the New Testament as Christians. And when we move to the New Testament and we get to the Gospel of John, we hear this. In the beginning was the Word. Let there be light. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made through him, right? In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us, and we have seen his glory. You know what it actually says? The Word became flesh, and he pitched his tent among us. And we've seen his glory, the glory that only Moses could see. Now we see it, because now God is not simply creating something and saying, whoa, look at this. Not just journeying with us on the outside of the camp. Now, our faith, our theology as believers in Jesus is that this light is the presence of God in our life today. It's in our midst today. It's who Jesus is. He walks with us. He takes on human flesh. And it assures this victory for us. It's the promise of joy and love and grace. And it's assurance of God's victory. This is really beautiful stuff when you think about it, because we start with like this, whoa, big God, light, big God. And then we have this God that's going to be with us on the outside of the camp. And then now we have this light that is in us, with us, walking amongst us, sharing amongst us, living amongst us. You know, that's why we tell the story of Christmas in the night, right? The shepherds come the night. All of this representing for us the sense that now God is abiding with us. God has pitched his tent with us. The light is here, and the light, nothing will extinguish it. The darkness has not overcome it. It's great. That's our theology. That's the core of what we believe as Christians, is that we have not only a God of creation, a God who brings light and says that it's good and creates things and says it's good and creates us and says it's very good and all of that. Not only a God who will stay outside the camp, and whenever we need him, we can go to him, but we have a God who's with us. Incarnate, Emmanuel, God with us, in and through all things. It's fascinating. It's great. It's huge. It's critical for us to understand it. But there's something more. It's also the key to living life, a good life. Paul says this in 5th chapter of Ephesians. You were once darkness, but now you're light. Live as children of light. Have nothing to do with darkness. Rather, expose it. Everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. You see, what Paul is saying is that now, this light for us, we were once of darkness. We were once of that castle, that fear of, here's the powers, and here's the control and the manipulation, the totality, what it may be. But now, you're light. Live as light. Live as children of light. Have nothing to do with the darkness. Rather, expose it. Bring it to the surface and let people see that darkness is actually nothing. It's nothing to be afraid of. It doesn't exist when the light is there. It completely goes away. It's our fear. It's our worry about the nothingness. And Paul says, this is who we are to be as a church. We're supposed to be the light of the world. How we live, what we do, matters not simply to us, but it matters to this world. We're going to have a children's pageant in here this evening and a covered dish. What's more church than a covered dish, right? But you see what happens in that is not we just come and celebrate our kids, and I hope if you don't have children that you'll especially come. It's not simply that we celebrate them, that we see them as the church. It's not simply that we find great joy in our being together, though we do. But that's a light to the world when we come together. You know, so don't judge me when I start to say this, because there's a compliment at the end of it. You all are a mess. I mean, I know you guys, a lot of you. And the ones that don't know, I'm sure, are just as much a mess as anybody. So what I mean by that is, where in the world, in today's world, and I'm very serious about this, where in today's world do you find people that think all these different things, all over the political spectrum, all over the spectrum of understanding all this stuff? Where do you find people that come together and choose to come together like that? Nowhere. Nowhere. Except the church. Except the church. Because we believe, you're here because we believe that there's something that binds us together that's greater and deeper than anything that distinguishes us or differentiates us from each other. And we believe that those things that are of the world, and yes, they're important. What happened in the castle could control all these things. We believe that those things are of darkness if they separate us. When we live in a world where we're afraid to say what we believe, because we're afraid that we'll be put in the darkness wins. And so what we find in the church is that the church is the place for us. The only place that I can see in the world that calls us to this level of all of us, all different kinds of backgrounds and ethnicities and all these experiences and beliefs, all that stuff, we come together. And that's not only for us, that's for the world to see. It really is. It's for the world to be able to see that there is still some hope in this world. We don't all have to be pulled off into our sections and fight or argue or feel like we're alienated from everyone else. We can be together. And when we do that, everything starts to change. And that light of the church starts to become a light for the world. And that's what this world needs today, is that light. We're going to have our winter shelter starting here next Sunday evening. So at the end of this service, we're going to turn it over, and for 2 weeks, we'll have folks experiencing homelessness on the floors here. And you're going to come and volunteer, and you're bringing coats and underwear and socks and all those kinds of things for people that desperately need it. And we're going to do that for those experiencing homelessness, yes. But that's not the whole reason. In fact, I don't even know that it's the real reason. Government can do that. What we bring is we see the identity of Christ in every single person that crosses the threshold of this place. And no matter who you are, no matter where you've been, no matter what you've done, we can say to you, welcome home, and we mean that because this is the place where everyone is welcomed into the body of Christ. But there's something even greater than that, I think. Who else is doing it? No one. Communities, neighborhoods, no one's organizing. Who's doing it? The church. The church. And what we do serves as a witness to this world for them to be able to see us. When we did the winter shelter here during COVID and we had folks in this space for 6 months, every night, for 6 months. You know, a lot of the people that the departments and agencies and all that we had to kind of work with because of all the health stuff and all like that, and many of those people had a resentment towards the church. They'd had some kind of wound, real or unreal or whatever, but some kind of hurt, and they had a judgment about us and who we are and what we thought we were about and all that kind of stuff. But we did it. And we did it every single day with love for our guests and love for them. And at the end of it, who could not say that the church was alive? That's the light. How we argue and debate, how we get along here, how we disagree, how we live our life, as messy as it is, how we share with each other. Every time someone takes a meal to someone who has just had a baby, or a meal to someone who just got a knee, all of that is caring for them, but it is showing a light to the world. That's what Paul is saying for us. We were once darkness, but now we're light. Live as children of the light. But there's something even more. It's our theology about who Jesus is as the light, and it shines and he's with us, and there'll never be darkness again. And then there's this sense that the church is the light, the city set on a hill, right? The light that serves and cares and is wounded and broken and all that. But here's something else. Let me get to it through the Bible. So, when Jesus was arrested the last night of his life, he was taken and he was put in a pit overnight before the trial and all that kind of stuff. The mockery happened later. And he was placed in a pit at a place we actually think we know where it is. We call it Peter Gallicantro, where the cock sang. It's a pit that we know dates to Jesus and before. And it is down so deep that it is completely pitch black. There's still marks where the shackles and all were up against the wall. And so we believe that this is where Jesus was placed. We have a lot of historical reasoning and some biblical reasons for it, why Jesus was placed. And we believe that one psalm was incarnated that night. Now here's what I mean by that. There's 150 psalms. I know this sounds very complicated, but just bear with me. 150 psalms. There's only one of the psalms that doesn't have a promise at the end. There's only one. It's this one. I'm going to read part of it to you. We believe this is what Jesus prayed that night. I am overwhelmed with troubles. My life draws near to death. I'm like one without strength. You've put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. You've overwhelmed me. You've taken me from my closest friends. You've made me repulsive to them. I can't escape. My eyes are dim with grief. I cry to you for help, Lord. Why, Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? You've taken me from friend and neighbor. Darkness is my closest friend. Jesus' night was a night when he died, was willing to die for us, where darkness was his only friend. And we all know people, and we have all been there ourselves, where we feel as if darkness is our only friend. It was in two different settings this week, with people I love and know and for whom I deeply care, who have lived in darkness in so many ways. A tragic accident from a drunk driver changes a young woman and her husband, newlywed, and her family forever. A cancer of a 3-year-old. Life can be hard. And all of us in some way know what that darkness is, to feel as if we've been rejected and God's hid his face from us. And I've come to realize that when that happens, people will have two choices. Now, both of them are legitimate choices. One of them is just to walk away. How can a loving God allow this to happen? How can all that and to walk away? Or, when that darkness descends, to draw near. And to believe even in the darkness that there's a light somewhere, someplace. I've seen and known people throughout my life who've made both of those decisions. And in some way, even as a pastor, I've respected that, both of those decisions. But I know as I look back on it, and I don't mean this in any judgmental way, I really don't. But the people who have walked away, I believe, walked away into an even deeper darkness and isolation and anger. I've never seen anyone find a new light, a new way of thinking, a new understanding, a new... But the people who have stayed and drawn in, the people who still argue with God and shout, and all of those things are appropriate, which they and we should. those people still have some light that makes their life and their experience so much deeper and purposeful. And here's the thing, you get to choose. You do. Jesus lets people walk away. The psalm may end in darkness, but your life doesn't have to. In the beginning was the Word. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And it never will. So, I'm going to Barnes & Noble. I see this book. I buy it. It's big and long. I don't know how many pages is like that. I sit down and I read it. I am determined to finish every single book I ever start. So I read and read and read. I got past the stuff that was meaningful for me, and I'm just reading. And you know what? At the end of it, it doesn't end. He never finished it. I read hundreds of pages, and it doesn't have an ending. You can imagine how galled I was at that. How in the world? It didn't have an ending. Just ends, like in almost kind of like mid-sentence. Just ends. And then I've been thinking, for decades and decades since, that's what the darkness does. It seems as if it never ends. It seems as if you're drawn and pulled down into it, and it will always be dark, and it will get darker and darker, and fear and doubt, and I'll do anything to try to get to the castle, even if I know it's bad for me. But there is something that does end in its beginning. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Let us be people of light. Let us be people of light for this world. Let us be people of light for our children. Let us be people of light for ourselves. Amen.